striker that holds the record for the most goals in the World Cup is Miroslav Klose, who is a Polish-born German striker. Now that's a good segue into today's topic, the controversial topic of international players, and obviously, either playing for the country that they're from or playing for another country through whatever means, whether that be, obviously, if they're from that country, then they're eligible to play for them. If their mum or father is from a different country, they're eligible for those countries. Also eligible through their grandparents. Another way you can also be eligible for an international team is if you've played in a country for 5 years. Now, Adnan Januzaj, now this is the most recent example that I can think of, was eligible for several countries: Albania, England, Belgium, Serbia, Montenegro. Sorry, Serbia, because they're separate, apologies. Turkey, and obviously the newly, obviously you can now play for them, Kosovo. Obviously there's obviously a few players that played for Serbia or Montenegro who have the option, I believe, to play for Kosovo. And Adnan Januzaj was a player that was born in Belgium and was very adamant about not playing for them, but ended up eventually kind of deciding to play for them after, really kind of dragging it out a wee bit. A player that, had a bright start to his career at Man United. He did very well under David Moyes, probably the only reason he actually stayed as long as he did. Then, was put out on loan, did not do really anything, out on those loans, was, non-existent at Sunderland. He's now obviously moved to Real Sociedad. Obviously, he's made a couple of appearances for Belgium, and I have heard that he's wanting to go back on that now and play for Kosovo. So, we'll see what happens there. But other situations, one of the kind of most kind of common teams, probably in terms of, if you think of actual quality and talent, would be the Netherlands. Players like Ruud Gullit, Frank Rijkaard, Edgar Davids, Aaron Winter, and Clarence Seedorf, all players actually born in Suriname, that obviously played for Holland. Now, Suriname obviously is a Dutch colony, so that makes them obviously eligible to play for Holland, but also they're obviously eligible to play for Suriname, and a lot of people would argue that they should play for Suriname, although not obviously not a recognised kind of football nation. With those kind of players, they certainly maybe would have had a chance of qualifying for the tournament. However, obviously, as you know, these players obviously decided to play for Holland. And had they not played for Holland, it certainly would have made a big difference. There's obviously the argument of the Suriname versus Holland team and who would come out on top. And I think obviously maybe one of the main questions for the Suriname Dutch team would be goalkeepers and defenders. Obviously, the French national team is very kind of well known now. Obviously, we've got Evra, who was born in Senegal. Desailly was born in Ghana. Makelele was born in the Democratic of Congo. Vieira was born in Senegal. And Zidane is of Algerian descent, but was actually born in Marseille. Now, obviously, you take these players out of France and they don't win the 98 World Cup. Desailly was a huge part of that. Makelele was a huge part of that. Vieira as well. Obviously, Zidane goes without saying. I mean, one of the greatest players of all time. So certainly, the African connection has certainly helped France. Obviously they have, the kind of French kind of colonies, and a lot of African people speak French as well. So that's something that, is very, very common, certainly. Diego Costa, a very interesting example. They're actually Brazilian-born, but plays for Spain, and I believe it's probably the only reason he's eligible is because he was in Spain for 5 years. Although he may obviously have parents that are from Spain, I'm not too sure about that. Christian Benteke and Basingwa, both from the Democratic of Congo. And obviously Benteke plays for Belgium, Basingwa plays for Portugal. Nani from Cape Verde. And then you have Germany, who obviously Gerald Asamoah, who's from Ghana. And as I mentioned before, Klose is obviously Polish, Podolski is Polish as well. And Podolski obviously used to play for Germany. Klose, obviously is retired now as well. Basically, a lot of international teams do this. I mean, a lot of the Scottish players are actually English-born, and then obviously Akichi Jan, is of African descent, certainly. The Republic of Ireland players, and especially the Northern Ireland players, are all very much of kind of English descent. And then you look at the Belgian national team, all these players that, actually from Zaire, that are from the Belgian national team, and Benteke, Casabelli, Mboma Penza, and Mudingaye. It's a subject that brings up a lot of controversy. There's obviously the argument, probably the most kind of common argument would be the problems in the Dutch national team back in the day, where there would be the camps. There'd be the kind of Suriname kind of camp, the kind of Suriname Dutch players kind of camp, and then obviously there would be the ones who were born obviously in Netherlands itself, and that was also blamed. That was usually a lot of the reason that was blamed for their lack of success in international tournaments, and it really is. If you think about the players that they've had, from Cruyff, Van Basten, obviously Rijkaard, Gullit, Kluivert, just to name a few. And obviously Kluivert wasn't the best in English football, but he was obviously a very good player in Holland, and he did very well in Spain. So, in my estimation, still a top player. It's one of the it's a situation where you have to kind of take some things on kind of face value. I mean, you got to think, if the likes of Zidane, say, had played for Algeria and had not played for France, and obviously Algeria hadn't qualified for a major tournament, Zidane would never. Well, he wouldn't have kind of been able to show himself on the biggest stage like he did. Although he was obviously playing for Juventus at the time, and Juventus is a huge club. Don't get me wrong, and obviously was signed for Real Madrid. A season after about 2 seasons after winning the World Cup, or it might have been the season after winning the World Cup. Sorry, the season after winning the World Cup. And not having players like that certainly make a big difference to these countries. But is it fair that if you obviously are in an African country like the Democratic Congo or Ghana, that you lose players like that because it's more fashionable to play for obviously the French national team, or in the Suriname case, the Dutch national team? Is it really fair? The answer is no, to be honest. I mean, these teams are actually missing out on having some phenomenal international teams themselves, although obviously not every piece of the puzzle is there. Sorry. Not every piece of the puzzle is there. But it's a kind of case by case thing. If you are playing for a country and if you're from the likes of Zaire have obviously qualified for the one World Cup, and that was obviously quite infamous, as we know, and we'll not go into that. And you're eligible to play for Belgium, for example. The chances are you're going to choose to play for Belgium, and I can't really kind of condemn a player for doing that, because although obviously you should play for in my opinion, you should play for the team that you're from, or at least a team that an international team that you're from, or possibly one obviously that obviously is where your parents' kind of birthplace. Then obviously, as I said, obviously there's a segue where there's 5 years playing in obviously a certain country, and then you're eligible for that country. Now that is a situation where, let's just say for example that you're a Brazilian player and you're not going to get in the Brazil national team, because obviously there's a lot of people in Brazil, and there's obviously some very, very good footballers, but out of all the people that are born in Brazil, very few of them obviously become those top footballers and creme de la creme, and even play for the Brazil national team. So, for example, say a Brazilian player plays in Scotland and plays, he's obviously there for 5 years. He's then eligible for the Scottish national team. Now, I think obviously the one of the questions is it right for that national team to pick him? I mean, I'll be honest with you. If a player can contribute to your national team and obviously make a difference, then it is correct to pick them. There is obviously the argument that maybe when the chips are down, maybe these players are not going to be. They're maybe not going to be as bothered as players that are actually from that country. Not going to quite wear their heart on their sleeve, and that's certainly the case with Januzaj in Belgium, because he clearly doesn't want to play for the Belgian national team. My opinion, to be honest, if you're obviously from a country and that is where you're born, that is a country that you should represent. However, if you're a player that you can obviously do a job for another country and they're struggling for players in that position, I think in a situation where they would actually be taking away a position from someone else who, say a promising English player, maybe losing his place because they've started to obviously go down the route of obviously having Brazilian players, Brazilian players that, not necessarily going to get into the Brazilian national team, and they obviously play there the 5 years. It's not correct that they would go in front of a promising English player that, a player is not being allowed to develop in favour of a player that, is not actually from there and obviously is only there for your technicality, which obviously is the 5 year thing. It's a case by case. It's definitely a case by case thing. But in my opinion, you should only you should only be allowed to play for the country, obviously where you're from, or the eligibility through your kind of parents. This kind of whole kind of grandparents thing, or the kind of 5 years making you eligible to play for the country, it's not really correct, to be honest. But there's going to be a lot of kind of different opinions on this. As I say, it's a very, very controversial subject. I want to give you obviously a bit of the background on this subject as well. But that's my opinion, and I will call that there.